Hello everyone, you're welcome to my channel. Today we have a fun and easy DIY project for you to make your own fabric belt. If you'd like to get on with it, stay tuned. So this are the things you'll be needing. We're starting with a piece of fabric which we'll be cutting. It could be, depending on how long you want it, 40 by 40 inches by 5 inches. You measure the length of the fabric that you want. It should be long enough to wrap around your waist 1.5 times. So my waist is 28, 29, and then half of that I just added to it, and I just made it 40, the length of this belt. I made it 40, and now I'm marking the length of the buckle, and the buckle is 2 inches. So adding sewing allowance, I'm marking 4.5 inches. Because I'm going to fold the belt and use about 1/2 inch as sewing allowance. So that's what I'm just doing here. So you can always measure it based on what your preference is, how thin or how fat you want the belt to be. And then you go ahead and pin the fabric together, because I don't want the fabric to shift as I'm cutting it. So I'm just putting a couple of pins there, and then I'll just go straight ahead to cut the 4.5 inches that I have already measured. Next, I'm putting the interfacing. Now the interfacing, I don't want it to be as thick as, as wide as the belt, and so I'm cutting about 4 inches, just reducing it by about 1/2 inch. But then I realized I could have done about 3.5, but I think 4 is okay for this belt. This particular interfacing is quite thick. So you can choose how thick you want it to be. My fabric is thick as well, but you just, depending on what you have available and what you want the end product to be. I realized that this facing is not fusible, which means it doesn't have the gum, and you can't attach it, but I'll be showing you later on how I got to attach it to the fabric. Right, here is attaching the interface to the fabric, and I did mention that I realized that it doesn't have the glue, and so I had to improvise, and I used a hemming gum, as you would see. So all I'm doing here is cutting a piece of the hemming gum. I'm doing it in bits. I don't want to do the entire stretch, so I don't create holes or bumps within the fabric. I'm cutting the hemming gum and placing the interfacing on it, and just using the heat from the iron to fuse both fabrics together. Also, if you don't have the interfacing, you can always use another piece of the fabric. So you'll cut out 2 pieces of the fabric and just bind them together using the hemming gum. This is just another way to save money and yeah, just be creative while you're trying to be creative. I'll just point out here that while you're using the hemming gum, you'll need to be careful with the heat from the iron, because it can affect the entire roll of the hemming gum from the distance. I mean, the heat can affect the hemming gum, so just be sure to move it at a distance from the iron. didn't have the full length of the interfacing, and so I had to do it in pieces, and so just having to iron them separately. Here I'm just ironing the front side of the belt, and just applying a lot of heat to ensure that everything is glued properly. I'm going ahead to iron the belt, just to put it in, folding it in two to create that crease. You may do this, you may not do this, but I just do this to help me so that as I'm sewing, the fabric doesn't shift as much. You can slant the edge of the belt to have a diagonal shape. It just gives it an extra nice look, and go ahead and use your sewing machine to sew down all the edges. Now you'll be sewing from the part where you cut up until the end of the length of the fabric. You will not be closing up the fabric because we're going to turn it inside out using the part that we have left open. Going ahead to trim the edges just to reduce any bulk that we may have. I mean, sewing with 1/2 inch would create some bulk, so I'm just going ahead to trim the edges, and then I will turn the belt inside out. Here I'm turning the fabric to the other side. This took a while for me, but if you have a chopstick, tweezers, a pen, you can always use that to turn it. And I know that these tools that they have now, but whatever you have, just turn it to the other side and give it a really good press. I'm using my tweezers, sewing tweezers, to make the edge of the part where I had cut pointed, just so that it has a very good finish. Go ahead and give it a really good press. And so we're done with the belt. Next we'll be going ahead to fix the buckle. Now there are two sides to the buckle. There's the front and then there's the back. The back usually has the groove where the belt goes through. So I'm just basically cutting pieces of fabric. I'll be needing two around the buckle. I'm putting the buckle in the middle, using it as a guide. I'm starting out with a lot of fabric, but eventually we'll keep trimming it until we have exactly what we need. I'll secure the fabric, the pieces, with pins, and go ahead and mark out the inside of the buckle, of the front part of the buckle. I'll just mark it, and then what I want to do is I will take it to my sewing machine and sew down on the part where the markings have been made. Using my sewing machine to just secure that part down. Once I've done that, I'll just take my scissors and cut within the perimeter of where I have just sewn. Be careful not to cut the stitches, but just cut within the stitches, and you'll have a nice rectangle in the middle. And so you want to go ahead and tuck in the top and just tuck it into the hole and bring it out at the bottom. And you have something like this, and you just go ahead and press it, give it a good press and just make it flat so you can see what you're working with. Right, next step is to put that buckle that we used as a measurement, is just slot it right in the middle. You sandwich it between the two pieces of fabric. And then you can just go ahead and trim. Looking at the buckle, the part that would be facing the inward part of the belt, I like to make that part a little shorter than the outward part, just so that I can tuck it in and fold it in. I'll be using a needle and thread to secure all the edges on the inside, not the outside, on the inside. The inside is the part that has the groove, and I'll just secure it round. And once I've got that done, I'll just make sure to trim the edges. There's lots of trimming going on. Just trim it to have enough fabric to sew and to cover the buckle. We're almost done here, about 90% I'd say. Still trying to secure the edges of the belt and just sew it in a way that it's all sewn on the inside. once you finish sewing it, you can see that the buckle is nice and neat. All you have to do is place the back part of the buckle on the part where you've just sewn. See that it fits perfectly. Go ahead and apply your glue. It can be super glue. Fabric glue may not work because you're attaching metal to fabric. Yeah, but I just use the combination of the two. But just go ahead and secure the back part of the buckle onto the part where you've applied the glue, and press it down real good. I had to use a piece of fabric to press it down just to make sure that it's well secured. There you have it. Now go ahead and place the strap or the flap that you had sewn and pressed down right through the groove of the buckle, and give it a neat sew across from one end to the other of the belt. And now we're done. Now you have your DIY belt.